Hey, this is Dr. Jill Crista coming to my family and friends with my Bee Who Shall Not Be Named update. The reason I'm saying that is that currently anything that has to do with alternative medicine and coronavirus is being censored. So, the Bee Who Shall Not Be Named, searchable on all of my posts about coronavirus and alternative medicine. So I will try really hard to talk slowly, but I have so much to share. Again, I just want to let everybody know we're dealing with this in my own house. And I've learned a little bit more about the behavior of the virus. It seems to have a second wave. I'm not sure if that is because people aren't resting, like you get a little bit better and then you get back to activity and you get sick again, which we see with the flu becoming pneumonia. Or if it's more like mono, meaning that you get a virus that your body doesn't ever really clear, and then you get a second exposure, then your body on that second exposure, if it's too soon, has a complete freak out and mounts a massive response, and that gathers more cytokines and leads you to having more probability of a cytokine storm. So my hunch is that it's the second version. Remember that in the first video, I told you that what's unique about this virus is that we have not yet adapted a way to close the door to it once we know we're being infected. That's unique to any other virus that we deal with on a daily basis. So colds, food poisoning, sinusitis, there's plenty of other viruses that we deal with all the time in many seasons, including the flu, that once our body senses that we've been exposed, it sends out a signal and our body starts to be able to shut the door and minimize our total viral load. That's unique to this virus. We don't have a door to shut innately, so we need to use help from things that we know work, like elderberry, possibly licorice. I've heard from my colleague, Dr. Tina Moore. So I think that what's happening is, okay, backing up, that means social distancing is so important because every time you get exposed to someone who is shedding virus, your body still has to deal with it. Now, it may not be completely symptomatic, but you do still have to mount an immune response in the location that you got your exposure. So if that was that you're doing a good job of breathing through your nose and that exposure was in the sinuses, you might get a little sinusitis. If you keep your mouth open, which is more risky, then you will get lung immune response in the lungs, and if that happened to be a foodborne exposure, then you might get diarrhea or inflammation of the gut. Again, I've, knock on wood, I'm probably cursing myself or jinxing myself right now, but I've been exposed to this now for 4.5 weeks through different family members and living in close quarters, being the cook. So far I'm doing okay. Every time I do get an exposure, I do get a little lung reaction, and because I had cardiomyositis from the mold, my heart will act up. Remembering that the virus is attracted to the ACE2 inhibitor, which means the ACE2 is called into areas of the body that need repair. So if you have inflammation or low-lying lack of repair of an area, or a chronic inflammatory thing in an area, like another example is I'm having a little neuroma in my right foot act up. I mean, that's kind of random, but I think that has to do with the fact that it will find areas that are already inflamed and that haven't completely healed, and it'll aggravate that area. What else can I tell you? Okay, it also is just a reminder, this goes into all the epithelial tissue. Epithelium line the linings of our body. So that is from our respiratory passages, so from the sinuses to the lungs. That is our GI, from the mouth to the anus, and that is other linings of our cardiovascular system, and that will explain, think about that now, our whole cardiovascular system is lined with epithelium. It's called endothelium when it's there, but it is similar in tissue, and this virus can invade those tissues. That's going to be important for understanding some other information that I'm going to present in a minute. So I think the second wave thing is that you get a viral load soon after you have mounted already an antibody response to the virus, and that induces an overwhelming response. And I'm kind of envisioning that the body's like, what, you again? We already kicked you out. And then it kind of has a freak out. We do see a third and fourth wave, but they're milder and less duration of the second wave. But the second wave can be very severe, and I think it's the second wave that's actually putting people in the hospital. In our case at home, it's the second wave that has caused the most lung pathology. And I'll let you guys know that what's working really well is liposomal quercetin and NAC, N-acetylcysteine, using 600 milligrams of quercetin. This is what we're using in my family. This is not medical advice. I'm not your doctor. I'm just sharing what's working for us. We have our own health stuff, pre-existing health stuff, but quercetin, 600 milligrams liposomal, 3 to 4 times a day, and NAC, 500 milligrams, 3 to 4 times a day at the same time as the quercetin. Also, I am using 2 teaspoons of elder tincture that I made, and a quarter to a half a teaspoon of cinchona bark tincture. Cinchona was used in the Civil War and is used for malaria because it's a quinine-containing plant. So again, if you have nothing at home and you're stuck at home and you can't get to the store, try tonic water. Try anything that you got there. And then anything with deep, deep color. So if you happen to have like natural brambleberry syrup at home and you start to develop a cough, get those deep color bioflavonoids into your body. We're also using very highly steeped green tea, and that seems to be helping, and melatonin at night. So that's kind of our little, I mean, there's lots of other stuff that we're doing. Oh, and vitamin C. Oh my gosh, I can't forget vitamin C. Liposomal vitamin C, when sick, trying to use it 1 gram an hour, which I talked about in previous videos. Okay, also super important, which doesn't get talked about, hydration. And I want to do props to my mentor, Dr. Paul Anderson. He has been saying this every time that he presents, and I'm going to explain later why that is so important for the mechanism of this critter, but just simply thinking about if it's the mucus linings of our body that is getting infected, you need to create a good slide, a good mucus slide. So make sure you're staying hydrated. Hydration also fuels fevers, which we want. We're talking about in a minute. Okay, I'm going to switch to that before I pontificate on that. All right, so talking about fevers, I found some research, and this was on surfaces, so we don't know how this behaves in vivo, in living systems, but I think it's very interesting that a lot of people are coming down with, they say that, you know, they're going to use a certain temperature of 100 degrees. If your fever is over 100 degrees, then it's possible that this is corona versus a common cold or flu. And what I found in the studies on surfaces is that they, once you reach a temperature of 100.4 with a high humidity, there's that hydration piece, that will kill the virus, and it had a kill rate of the most effective at 24 hours. So I think a long-term fever is really necessary. You've heard me talk in other videos about not taking Advil for other reasons that had to do with the ACE2 inhibitor. But I'm also not a huge fan of reducing fever, because fever is our best remedy for getting on top of these bugs. This bug dies at 100.4 on surfaces. It may need a little higher in a body. So supporting and fostering that fever in any way that you can helps you knock down your viral burden. And I think it's your body being completely wise. So make sure that you're fostering that fever and you're hydrating enough so you can get the fever you need. Okay, lots of questions about masks. What is the purpose of the mask? I think now there's been enough stuff in the media about why you're doing it. You're wearing a mask to protect others, not to protect yourself necessarily. There's only preliminary research that this can be airborne, meaning on airborne respiratory droplets. They're smaller than respiratory droplets, and airborne means it can stay ever suspended in the air for a certain amount of time. In that case, what I would do if I were a healthcare worker, I've said this before, is putting essential oils on my mask. And I have a report from a healthcare worker who has been doing this, and so far so good, knock on wood. We still have a negative coronavirus in her, at least negative symptoms. And her description is that she's using eucalyptus essential oil, inhalational grade, and that she just feels like it is really helping her breathe better. So eucalyptus is one of those in my book that is an antifungal and a mixed antimicrobial. Okay, there's some debate about whether using ventilation or ventilators is actually the right way to go. And also, if we've decided we do need to use it, is using an ARDS protocol really the best way? Because it can cause lung damage and end organ damage. My colleague, Dr. Daniel Chong, sent me a video, if you want to look it up, from a Dr. Cameron Kyle-Sidell, where he's talking about this and asking the question, is it better to actually put someone on oxygen earlier and just oxygen? And he's also saying that he's seeing this not act like acute respiratory distress syndrome, but actually, which is ARDS, is actually looking like the bends, which is something when someone has, it's decompression syndrome. So when you have been, scuba divers know about this. So when you've been down in too long or come up too quick from scuba diving, you can get something called pulmonary decompression syndrome. And it's basically the bends, and they put people in hyperbaric oxygen chambers to treat this. His thought question out there to all of us was, is hyperbaric actually a better treatment for this? So I'm just putting that out there. If you have hyperbaric oxygen at your hospital, or you have a family member in, I would encourage them to make sure that they check out his video. And you can search it on Google, Cameron Kyle-Sidell, Kyle-Sidell, S-I-D-E-L-L. It is very fascinating, and it goes along with that idea that I was just telling you, that the endothelium, the epithelium of the cardiovascular system, is also infected and gets involved, and that would have to do with oxygen exchange at the capillary level, which is what the bends are. So I just think that's fascinating, something you guys need to know. We talked about zinc last time, about how what's unique about this condition is the lack of taste and smell, and that's related to zinc deficiency. We've been playing around with zinc, we should have said that in the beginning, zinc, because for our family, the lack of taste and smell was not an early sign, it was actually a later sign. And so I just wanted to let you know that can either be an early sign, letting you know you may have it and to go ahead and isolate, or that you need zinc. In our family, I think that we are pretty zinc sufficient because of the way that we eat and supplement. So that didn't show up until we were one family member 6 days and one family member 8 days into the virus. Zinc foods to think about are seeds. So pumpkin seeds are one of the best source. Oysters, Patagonia oysters, and organic whole grains, if you can do that and you're a moldy. Okay, what can I tell you about drugs? Hydroxychloroquine, chloroquine, and quinine are old malarials. Usually they were used in combination. They are what's called a zinc ionophore. What that means is they help open cells to let zinc come in. And I think that's so interesting that, are those actually necessary if you can keep someone's zinc status up? So I highly encourage everybody to go to Dr. Paul Anderson. He's my mentor, and he also covers all of this and made the connection between the fact that these are zinc ionophores and that people are getting these zinc deficiency symptoms. Other zinc ionophores are green tea. That's why we're using green tea, and quercetin. We're using that too. So zinc ionophores reduce viral replication. But and they don't, so if you're doing the natural ones, they don't have all the side effects of these other drugs. It's really important to know that there are some serious side effects from hydroxychloroquine, especially when you use it in combination with azithromycin. You can get cardiac abnormalities called a QT elongation. You get visual problems. These are not drugs without side effects. So possibly starting with some zinc ionophores, things that open the door to zinc, and zinc high foods might be a more solid way to go. And if you have mold, people often have KPU, which is cryptopyruria, where you're dumping zinc. So moldies, you need to be even more careful about your zinc status. Okay. I have just a thought about this trend that I'm seeing about blaming those with pre-existing conditions. I've seen comments all over the place from, why are African Americans dying more of this? Did they just not follow the state order? And I just think that's a really scary trend. And I wanted to open this up to a discussion, or this disease is lifting the veil on a lot of inequities in our country. But I think one of the biggest inequities is that we've allowed companies to pollute our environment and our behaviors to pollute our environment, and those are definitely and significantly affecting the risk factors for this virus. I'm going to give some examples. Simply being exposed to an urban environment that has a high particulate matter called PM 2.5, simply being exposed to that for 48 hours, just a minimum 48 hours, increases your risk of developing diabetes and hypertension, which is high blood pressure. If you have mold, which we know is more than an aesthetic issue, you have a high cytokine status, or status. You are swimming in a higher inflammatory environment. This is not something people choose. This is something that happens to people. It's not, and this has been controlled for the whole urban thing, the study, and I'm going to attach studies to all of this. That has been controlled for age, gender, smoking, diet, I think that's it, exercise. So this is not a factor of somebody being lazy or being African American or anything like that. It has to do with our exposure to our environment. Asthma has an increased risk of developing asthma, which puts you at risk for coronavirus if you are exposed to both urban and farm particulate matter. Exposure to emissions and glyphosate increases our risk factors. So I have one other from Dr. Perlmutter, who I greatly respect, from the Brain Degeneration Summit, which is going on now. He had a statistic from the Journal of Diabetologia, I hope I said that right, where you have it, just by being male and being exposed to mold, you have an increased risk of diabetes, 46% for men, 71% increased risk for women. And that was the Women's Health Initiative study for in JAMA, 150,000 women in that study. So we have some environmental things that we really need to hear the call of our planet and our own bodies and get cleaned up. I'm hoping that this experience not only helps us not blame the victim and expand our awareness to what some of the factors could be, not just talking about economic disparities, but just some of our environmental ones. I'm hoping that we hear the call here and start to make some very deep policy change. When we get back to we're in a new normal here. I don't want to get back to old normal. I want to get back to a new normal where we get our lives back and we're taking care of our planet. Okay, and a last statement on uncertainty. What we don't know today, we never did know. And we made it through these things. So stick together, everybody. Love you all. Bye.